Hey everyone, Opalinsky here. In this video, I'll be showing you how to make a realistic terrestrial planet in Blender like this one. For some background, I created this technique in mid-2024 while playing around with the bump node in the shader editor, and realized I could also use it to make terrestrial planets look more realistic. I accomplished this using noise textures, which help give the continents, oceans, and clouds a more organic feel and texture, and color ramps, which allow a more natural transition between biomes. I recommend this tutorial primarily for conworlders, speculative biologists, and sci-fi writers, but it's also a good exercise for regular Blender artists like me. Now, let's land our spacecraft and make our first terrestrial planet. First, open a new general file, delete the default cube, and add a UV sphere mesh. Then go into edit mode, select all faces, and select shade smooth. That's all the modeling we'll need for this tutorial, so go into the shading tab and click add new material, add a texture coordinate node, a mapping node, and a noise texture mode. Plug the texture coordinates generated output into the mapping node, the mapping node's output into the noise texture's vector input, and the noise texture's factor output into the base color input. As you can see, there are no visible black and white spots, which we'll need for this tutorial, so add a color ramp node, set the black marker's position to 0.5 and the white marker's position to 0.75, then set the specular to 0. This planet's continents should be bigger, so set the noise scale to 2.5 and crank the detail as high as it can go to give the continents an organic feel. Now, add a bump node. Plug the color ramp's factor output into the bump node's strength and height inputs, then plug the bump node's output into the principal BSDF's normal input. Now it's starting to look like a planet. However, as this is a terrestrial planet, there need to be visible oceans. So add another color ramp and add 2 more markers. Then, import a texture of Earth at daytime like the one I'm showing. There are many websites that offer free textures of planets and the night sky. One that I found is SolarSystemScope.com, which provides 4K and 8K image textures, so I highly suggest downloading an Earth texture from there. Import the Earth texture into the image editor and zoom into Antarctica. Set the color for marker 0, which is at the far left, with the eyedropper over the ocean. Then set the color for marker 1 to the same color, but set its alpha to 0 and position to 0.01. Next, set the color for marker 2 with the eyedropper over Antarctica, then set its alpha to 0 and position to 0.7. Finally, set the color for marker 2 with the same color, but with its alpha at 1, then set the position to 0.75. This defines the oceans and mountain snow caps, but it still doesn't look anything like a terrestrial planet. So add a mix color node, set the A input to a greenish color as a placeholder, hook the color ramp's color output to the B input and alpha output to the factor input, then connect the mix color's output to the base color input. Now the snow caps are discernible, but the planet still looks cartoony looking as the continents are otherwise a single color. So here, we duplicate the noise texture and color ramp, connect the mapping node to the new noise node. Now duplicate that color ramp and add a third marker at position 0.5. Zoom into Central Africa on the image editor, set marker 0's color with the eyedropper over the Congo rainforest, marker 1's color with the eyedropper over the Sahel, and marker 2's color with the eyedropper over the Southern Sahara. Connect the nodes together and voila! But not really. Scale up the noise texture to 4 to disperse the biomes. Now it's starting to look like an actual terrestrial planet. Feel free to change the continent's shapes by changing the mapping node's location and rotation inputs to your liking. However, I suggest not to touch the scale input because doing so leads to some rather funky results. But for this tutorial, I will leave the transformation inputs to the defaults. Now, one more thing our little blue marble needs is clouds. So copy the mapping, noise texture, and color ramp nodes that determine the continent's shapes and plug the texture coordinate node into the new mapping node and the mapping node into the noise's distortion input. Add a new mix color node, set input B to white, hook it into the base color input, then hook the new color ramps output into input B. On Earth, cloud bands tend to be horizontal, so ramp the mapping node's Z-scale up and we're done with our planet. Now switch to the world shader and import an image texture of the Milky Way. However, there are no stars present because we need a texture coordinate and a mapping node. Plug the texture coordinate node's normal output into the mapping node's vector input, then plug the mapping node's output into the image texture's vector input. As you can see, the image is stretched. The best way to fix this is to set the X rotation to 90 degrees. Our project is not complete without sunlight, so set the default light's location and rotation transformations to 0, then move it backward along the y-axis so it's behind the camera. Set the light type to area with an X and Y size of 10 meters and power to 10 kilowatts. Set the X rotation to 90 degrees and switch the viewport shading to rendered preview. Move the light toward or away from the planet to your liking, and move the camera closer to the planet to your liking. This is mostly a process of trial and error, as you'll need to move the camera outside of camera view, then go back into camera view to check. Once you're satisfied, go to Render, Render Image, or hit F12 to render your finished project. Looking great. What if you want to animate the planet like shown in this video's intro? Increasing the Z rotation rotates the planet counterclockwise, which is the direction Earth rotates. At frame 1, insert a keyframe with Z rotation at 0 degrees, then at frame 361 insert a keyframe with Z rotation at 360 degrees. Play the animation and that doesn't look right. The planet's rotation speeds up and then slows down because Bezier interpolation is the default. So select both keyframes and set the interpolation mode to linear. Looks much better. However, this isn't complete without the clouds moving as well. Go back to frame 1, switch to the shading tab, open your planet's material, and add a keyframe to the rotation input for the mapping node. Then, go into the animation tab, open the shader editor, go to frame 361, and add a keyframe with the Y rotation at 360 degrees. Select the mapping node, hit A, then click right on the dope sheet, and set the interpolation mode to linear. Going back to the layout tab, and scrolling through the animation, the clouds are moving and changing shape like they do on Earth. Finally, go to Render, Render Animation, and hit Ctrl plus F12 or Command plus F12 to render your final project. And that sums it up. If you find this Blender tutorial useful and want more from me in the future, like this video and subscribe. You should expect tutorials like this to become a series of sorts on my channel. However, don't expect it to have regular uploads. Thank you for your time, and I'll leave you with this spinning planet.